What's up guys, my name is Brock, you're watching The Modest Man, and today we're talking about how to choose the right size watch for your wrist. In this video, I'm going to tell you how to figure out how big your wrist is, and then we're going to talk about a couple different methods for choosing the best size watch for you. Before we get into it, a quick thank you to today's video sponsor. Alright, huge thank you to Farfetch for sponsoring today's video and for providing these lovely Nomos watches that we'll use as examples throughout the video. Farfetch is an online shop that carries items from thousands of boutiques and designers from all around the world. I'm talking about everything from Gucci and Tom Ford to Nike and Levi's. I especially love browsing their men's watch department, a collection that includes brands like Tag and Zenith and of course Nomos. They also carry pre-owned luxury watches from brands like Cartier and Rolex, and more affordable brands like Timex and G-Shock. You can tell the people behind Farfetch really love fashion. They're trying to make it accessible to everyone around the world. That's why they ship to over 190 countries. They even do same-day delivery in some cities like London and New York. A while back, I bought some sneakers from Farfetch, and I ended up having to make a return. And I've shopped at a bunch of different online stores, and I can say that the returns and the exchange process with Farfetch was pain-free. It was very easy. Their customer service was delightful to deal with, and I'll definitely be shopping there again when I'm ready for that pair of common projects. So if you're into designer clothing and accessories, or you just love men's watches, I think you'll enjoy browsing Farfetch.com. Click the link down below in the description to check out Farfetch, and I will link to each of these Nomos watches that you see in the video. So if you want to check these out, links below in the description. First of all, does watch size even matter? Yeah, it's important to wear a watch that fits your wrist, in the same way that it's important to wear clothes that fit your body. Does this mean that you can't wear a watch that's really big or really small, even if you love it? No, you should wear the watch that you love. You know, it doesn't really matter how big it is, but if you do want to choose that perfectly sized watch for your wrist, this video is going to help. So real quick, let's introduce the watches that you're going to see throughout the video. These watches are all from German watchmaker Nomos. First up, we have the Tangant 35mm, then we have the Metro Date Power Reserve 37mm, the Metro Neomatic 39mm, and the Orion Neomatic Date 41mm. So we're covering a full spectrum of sizes, and we're going to use these watches as examples today. You can find links to each of these pieces down below in the description. The most common mistake when it comes to wearing watches that guys make is wearing watches that are too big for their wrist. Watch sizes have increased dramatically over the decades, and these days most contemporary watches are unnecessarily oversized. They're like big cars with little engines. They're big for no reason. You know, most of these watches are battery powered, they're quartz fashion watches, and there's no complicated movements inside. You know, you don't have a nice mechanical movement powering the watch, so they're big just to be big. Now, before the wristwatch was invented, men carried around pocket watches, and what made these little mechanical devices so amazing was their size. You know, finally the clock was portable. At one point, it became cool to have an unnecessarily large watch, and it's kind of swinging back in the other direction recently, but still oversized large watches are still kind of in vogue for men right now. I think it's kind of the same as like baggy clothing. Guys have been led to believe that bigger is better, and that bigger watches are better for men, and that smaller watches are more feminine. I think this is nonsense. I think just like with clothes, everybody, regardless of gender, should just wear what fits them. And if you're a bigger guy and you want to wear a smaller watch, that's totally fine. It's not really going to look bad, but if you do have a slender wrist, I think you should try to avoid watches that are too big. So, how do you figure out your wrist size? This is the first step in finding the perfect watch, and the good news is it's very easy. You just need a soft measuring tape. This is also called a tailor's tape, and you want to wrap it around your wrist at the widest point, which is right around the bone. And that's it. That's your wrist size. Now, if you don't have a soft measuring tape, you can use a string or even cut a strip of paper, wrap it around your wrist and mark it with a pen, and then lay it out flat and measure it with a ruler or a measuring tape. So once you know your wrist size, then you'll have an idea of which watches are going to work best for you. I'll also put up a chart on the screen that's going to give you an approximate guideline. Again, this isn't set in stone, so take all of this with a grain of salt. Okay, so let's talk about how watches are actually sized. There are two dimensions to pay attention to. The first one is case diameter, and the second one is lug to lug. The case diameter is the most important measurement, and it's what's usually listed. So when you see a 35 millimeter watch, that's referring to the case diameter. So that's the most important measurement, but you should also pay attention to the lug to lug, which is the distance from the bottom of the lugs to the top of the lugs. Now keep in mind, this is different than lug width, which determines how wide the strap is. Now for the most part, watches that have big cases are gonna have longer lug to lug distances, but there are some brands, and Nomos is notorious for this, that will have longer lug distances even on their smaller watches. So for example, this 37 millimeter watch has a pretty significant lug to lug distance, and that's something to keep in mind, especially if you have a smaller wrist. And for that reason, it's important just to do a visual inspection. So when you're gonna buy a watch, especially if you're gonna invest a real, significant amount of money in a watch, you wanna try it on and just look at it and, be honest with yourself. How does it look on your wrist? Now with the lug to lug, what you wanna pay attention to is you wanna make sure that the lugs aren't extending out past your wrist. Conventional wisdom says that the lugs shouldn't go past your wrist. And again, this is a good guideline, but it's okay if they do. For example, I have this Hamilton khaki mechanical. It's a 38 millimeter watch, but the lug to lug is very long, and technically it's probably a little too big for my wrist, but I still wear it because I like it. All right, and just to give you a visual idea of how different size watches look on different size wrists, I'm gonna show you how each of these different Nomos watches looks on my wrist and then somebody with a larger wrist. Now, having said all of this, I think the sweet spot for guys is 38 to 40 millimeters. So, for most guys, if you have somewhere in the average size wrist, a 38 millimeter watch is gonna look great. 40 millimeter watch is gonna look great, regardless of lug to lug or any other measurement. For example, if you look at these Nomos watches, this 39 millimeter version is gonna look good on almost anybody. For me, as a guy with more slender wrists, if I had to pick from this lineup, I would definitely go with the 35 millimeter or the 37 millimeter. But at the end of the day, remember, you have to wear a watch that makes you happy, a watch that you enjoy wearing, and that gets you looking down at your wrist more often throughout the day. All right, I hope this video was helpful. You can find links to everything you saw in the video down below in the description. If you have any questions for me, leave them down in the comments section. Thank you as always for watching, and until next time, stay stylish.